The knife in my hand wasn't the dangerous thing at dinner. It was the whisper on my phone. "Who's in your house?" Mrs. Patel's voice was a paper cut, small, fast, bleeding before you notice. It was Sunday, December 14th, in Naperville, Illinois, the kind of cold that keeps the porch light honest. I was at my daughter Hannah's townhouse 3 miles away, carving roast. Trying to pretend my first Christmas as a widower didn't hum like a refrigerator in the next room. Before I even stood up, I could see it in my mind, my porch light flicking on, and 2 silhouettes moving like they'd practiced. "Mark," Hannah said, eyes on the knife, then on me. "Dad." I swallowed the churn, put the knife down so carefully the fork stopped vibrating. "Mrs. Patel says someone's inside." I tapped the doorbell app with a thumb that suddenly felt 30 years older. Her frame froze. Hooded figure, gloved hands. The kind of confidence you only carry when you think you belong. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from, because what happened next is why I keep every receipt and why I don't leave house keys in places thieves would approve of. I told Hannah, "Stay with the kids. I'll call 911 from the car." She reached for my sleeve, then let go. The townhouse door pulled a draft across my ankles, like a reminder that some families close behind you and some blow cold. Route 59 was a ribbon of salt and gray. I gave the dispatcher my address and the detail that mattered most. No forced entry last time I checked. "Whoever's inside has a key." The cruisers beat me to my block, red and blue washing over the snow. Senior officer took one look at my phone and said, "We'll sweep." The house smelled like December and somebody else's cologne I didn't buy. The officers moved room to room, calm, professional, talking to each other in clipped commas. In my kitchen trash, a crumpled contractor estimate, emergency roof repair, $2,800, dated December 10th, paid cash. I haven't had a leaky roof in 10 years. The paper was still warm from the anxiety in my hand. My file drawer in the office hung open, like a mouth that had lost the word no. A folder was missing, the one with my power of attorney papers from my knee surgery back in May. I'd insisted on a sunset clause. It expired August 31st. I said that aloud, as if it would put the folder back. It didn't. On the counter lay something that turned my stomach colder than the kitchen tile. My old spare key from the grill cabinet, the one I'd told myself I'd moved months ago. It sat there like a guilty coin. "Back door is secure," an officer said. "No pry marks." He looked at the counter, at the key. "Know who else has access?" I thought of my son, Kyle, and the last text he sent. "We should talk investments." I thought of his wife, Brianna, whose handwriting wrapped birthday cards in loops that pretended to care. There was a sticky note in that same looping script under the crumpled estimate, "We'll fix things." I locked eyes with the senior officer. "Someone came shopping," I said. "For my life." They cleared the rooms, took my statement, left me with a thin report and my own front door closing behind their boots. The silence afterward was louder than any siren. I slid the spare key into my pocket and felt the weight of every December bill in my ledger, every receipt I'd ever underlined. The house had been entered, not broken. That was the betrayal. On the way back to Hannah's, the phone vibrated with the doorbell cam's last frame. A ghost of movement at 6:11 p.m. I knew 2 things before the heater found my hands. Whoever was in my house believed paper could beat me, and they were about to learn. I've been collecting paper all my life. It wasn't the missing folder that broke me. It was the note. 3 words written in Brianna's looping handwriting, "We'll fix things." That line sat in my palm, the way a lie sits behind a smile. When I got back to Hannah's house that night, the smell of roast still clung to my jacket, but it didn't feel like dinner anymore. I shut the door quietly, sat on the couch and stared at the blank television. Hannah came in with 2 mugs of tea, her voice soft, like she was trying not to startle an animal. "Dad, what happened?" I told her everything. The key on the counter, the invoice, the open drawer. I watched her face fold the way her mother's used to when bad news arrived slowly. "They didn't break in," I said. "They walked in." She blinked. "You think it was Kyle?" I didn't answer, because even saying his name out loud felt like I was calling something dirty into the room. Instead, I opened my wallet and took out the small photo of him from years ago, him holding a baseball glove, smiling like he'd never learned how to lie. "I think," I said carefully, "that somebody used the key I thought I'd lost. And the papers I should have locked up." She set her mug down. "That power of attorney from when you had surgery?" I nodded. "Expired August 31st. I checked it myself." For a long moment we didn't speak. The only sound was the hum of her refrigerator. My wife had died in July. I'd had knee surgery in May. Kyle was the one who drove me home from the hospital, helped me sign that temporary form. "Just to keep things moving, Dad," he'd said. Bills, utilities, little stuff. Now I was starting to realize what little stuff meant. I drove back to my house the next morning. December 15th. The snow was thin but crisp, the kind that squeaks under your boots. The driveway looked untouched, but the front door, my new deadbolt, stuck halfway through its turn. A sign of tampering, or maybe just my imagination. Either way, I called a locksmith. He was a younger guy with wind-burned cheeks who hummed while he worked. "Somebody's been in here," I told him. He crouched, shined a light at the lock. "Yeah, see that scratch? Someone tried to pick it, but they didn't finish the job. Probably didn't have the right rake tool." The words hit harder than I expected. I asked him to replace the lock, $389 cash, and took his receipt underlining the date. My ledger was open on the table before he even packed up his drill. That night, I sat in my living room surrounded by the smell of fresh brass and cold air. Every noise made me flinch. I opened my desk drawers one by one. Bills, warranty papers, my wife's hospital forms, all there. But the POA copy was gone, along with a flash drive I'd kept labeled Home Docs. When I turned on my phone, there were no new messages from Kyle, just an old one from 3 months ago. "We should talk about refinancing the place. It's dumb to let the equity sit there." Equity. That was his word for the house his mother had loved more than anything. The house we'd built one receipt at a time. I took out my ledger, the same one I'd started the year I retired. I wrote in the margin, December 15th, house entered. Locks changed. Missing, POA folder, flash drive, peace of mind. Then I sat there staring at the numbers, the bills that made sense. The mortgage line that said paid in full. 2004. I remembered my wife sitting right where I was now, saying, "Promise me this house stays in the family." And I had promised, but now the family was trying to take it. At 11:47 p.m., Hannah texted me, "You okay, Dad?" I typed back, "No, but I will be." I made coffee, black and bitter, and walked through the house one more time. Every door locked, every curtain drawn. The house didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt like a crime scene that was still waiting for the confession. I placed the spare key on the table and stared at it until the room blurred. Whoever walked into my house had done it with confidence, because they thought they owned a piece of me. They didn't know I kept better records than God. Tomorrow, I'd stop mourning and start counting, because grief was getting me nowhere, but math leaves footprints. If they were going to steal my life on paper, I'd make paper the trap. December 16th started grey and still. I made black coffee and opened my ledger, the same one Kyle used to tease me about, saying I treated life like an audit. I scanned every entry for December line by line, until my pen stopped at the 2800 invoice I'd found in the trash. The company name, Franklin Home Repair, was stamped across the top in a fading blue ink. A phone number below it I dialed. "Franklin Repairs." A man answered, chewing gum. "Yeah," I said, disguising my voice with a hint of age and confusion. "I'm calling about a roof leak." "Same neighborhood as before." He hesitated, then said, "Oh, same as last time." "Right," I replied softly, pen poised. "Same house," he chuckled. "That lady said it was urgent. Cash job, no paperwork. You want me to come by again?" "Lady Cash, urgent." I wrote it all down, the way a man records scripture. Then I said, "Let me check with my wife," and hung up. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was electric. They hadn't just wandered into my house. They'd already been doing business in my name. By noon, I was sitting across from attorney Linda Cho, a calm woman with dark-rimmed glasses and the patience of a surgeon. Her office smelled like legal pads and peppermint tea. I told her everything, from the call to the missing folder. She didn't interrupt once. When I finished, she slid a notepad toward me. "First," she said, "the power of attorney expired on August 31st. You need a copy of that notary log to prove it. Second, get any bank records showing attempted transactions. Third, change your locks again and document it." "Already done," I said, handing her the locksmith's receipt. She smiled slightly. "Good. Now, if they're acting under a false POA, they're setting themselves up for a felony. You don't need revenge, Mr. Ellison. You just need evidence." I leaned back. "Then I'll get evidence." That afternoon, I met Jean Doyle, a private investigator recommended by a retired cop I'd once inspected houses with. Jean was ex-Chicago PD, mid-50s, eyes like headlights in fog. "This'll cost you $2,500 for a week's watch," he said. "I'll set a camera across the street, pull your doorbell cloud footage, and run the contractor's number." "Worth every penny," I said, handing him an envelope and my spare house photo for reference. "And Jean, get me a statement from that roofer if you can." While Jean got to work, I sat in my kitchen with my old printer humming like a guard dog. I printed certified letters, $9.85 postage each, to my bank, my title company, and Franklin Home Repair. Nothing fancy, just formal notices requesting verification of any work, lien, or inquiry on my property. Paper Shields at 5:12 p.m., Hannah texted, "You should see Brianna's Instagram." I sighed. What now? She sent a screenshot, a story from December 10th. A Google map with my street circled and a winking key emoji. That wasn't coincidence. That was arrogance. I printed it out, hole-punched it, and added it to my growing binder labeled House Deck 14 Incident. As night fell, I sat with my old ledger beside the new binder. My wife used to call me meticulous. "You don't let go of anything," she'd said once, laughing as she watched me archive grocery receipts. She was right, and for the first time that habit was going to save me. I didn't feel like a victim anymore. I felt like a man preparing for discovery. The next morning, December 17th, Jean texted me a single line. "Got them on camera last night. Same car as your son's." He attached a still image, dark, grainy, but unmistakable. The shape of Kyle's left knee bent inward. The same limp from his old softball injury. I printed it, slid it into the binder, and whispered, "Gotcha." Attorney Cho called that evening to schedule a meeting for December 18th at First Prairie Bank. "We'll flag your accounts," she said. "If they try to touch anything, we'll see it first." That night I took one last look around my house before bed. Every window locked, every receipt logged. The house felt alive again, not scared, but watchful. I wrote one final note in the ledger before turning off the light. Deck 17. Set trap. They think I'm asleep. Let them walk into daylight tomorrow. I'd sit across from the bank manager and give him a name, Kyle Ellison, and see how deep my son's greed really went. The banker's face changed the second he saw the last name on my folder. It was Thursday, December 18th, and the frost hadn't melted off the bank's glass doors yet. Inside, First Prairie Bank smelled like carpet cleaner and holiday coffee. I sat across from Mr. Delgado, a man who looked like he'd been balancing ledgers since the Reagan years. His tie was perfectly gray, his pen already poised. "I'm here about my home equity account," I said, sliding him a copy of my expired power of attorney. "And about my son." He read the document, his eyes slowing on the date, expires August 31st. Then he opened his computer, clicked a few keys, and frowned. "Mr. Ellison, we had a call logged just yesterday. Someone named Kyle Ellison asked about drawer availability on your equity line." He turned the screen slightly toward me. There it was, my son's name, my address, and a note from the banker who'd taken the call. Caller requested $120,000 draw before Christmas. I didn't feel my heartbeat. I only felt the chair beneath me and the cold truth landing on my chest like ice water. Mr. Delgado leaned in. "Would you like us to flag this account?" "Yes," I said quietly. "Flag it, freeze it, and send me a record of every contact under that name." He nodded. "We'll also require physical ID for any future activity." When I left the bank, the winter light felt sharper, crueler. I drove straight to Attorney Cho's office. She read the report, adjusted her glasses, and said, "This is exactly what I needed. We can file a protective notice with the bank and title company immediately." She drafted the document right there. 2 pages. Clean, precise. Any reliance on expired power of attorney executed May 2025 is unauthorized. Owner retains full rights and title. We emailed copies to the bank, the county recorder, and my insurance company. Then she looked up. "Do you want to play defense or offense?" "Both," I said. "In writing." At home, the locksmith came back for the follow-up inspection. He handed me photos of tiny scrape marks around the old deadbolt, evidence of a failed picking attempt. I stapled the pictures to his receipt and labeled it "Lock Tampering, Deck 18. That evening, my private investigator, Jean, called. "Got something, Mark. The contractor, Frank, says he was paid cash by a woman matching Brianna's description. Blonde, late 30s, long nails, called herself prepping property for inspection. He thought she was your wife." "Did he keep any texts?" I asked. "He did," Jean said. "I took photos. The messages start on December 10th and end on the 14th, the night of the break-in. Pickup was supposed to be that night. She even mentioned Dad's house in one text. I gripped the phone tighter. "You can send those to my lawyer, right?" "Already did." "And Mark," Jean paused, "this isn't sloppy theft. It's a plan. They're trying to liquidate you before New Year's." I laughed bitterly. They picked the wrong accountant. When we hung up, I sat in silence for a long time, letting the anger settle into something cleaner, resolve. I went to my office, turned on my printer again, and made copies of everything: bank report, POA, contractor statement, locksmith photos. Then I started a new section in my binder labeled Evidence, Deck 1819, before sealing the folder. I whispered into the quiet room, "Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from, because what comes next is the part most people never see." The paperwork fights back. By midnight, I drafted a checklist for the next phase. File emergency injunction, draft with Attorney Cho, serve notice to Kyle and Brianna through their lawyer. Let them try to use that. Expired POA in writing. The trap was almost ready. The next morning, December 19th, I took my coffee to the window and watched the sunlight crawl across the snow-covered porch. My neighbor, Mrs. Patel, waved from her driveway. She mouthed, "Everything okay?" I smiled faintly. Getting there, I wasn't just defending my home anymore. I was building a paper fortress they couldn't climb. If they wanted to weaponize signatures, I'd use signatures to bury them, and all I needed now was for them to take the bait. The text arrived at 9:14 a.m. sharp. "We'll need Dad's signature, unless we use the other option." It was sent to the family group chat. Hannah wasn't even supposed to see it, but one of my cousins still had her number from a Thanksgiving thread and forwarded the screenshot. Brianna's name sat at the top, the message glowing like a threat wrapped in manners. I stared at the words until they blurred. Other option. What other option? By noon, I had my answer. Mr. Delgado called from the bank. His tone was brisk, professional, but underneath it a note of worry. "Mr. Ellison," he said, "we had another inquiry on your account this morning. A pre-approval checklist was pulled for a home equity draw. Amount requested, $120,000. The caller referenced your date of birth and property address." I pinched the bridge of my nose. "Who was the caller?" He hesitated. "Same name, Kyle Ellison. I wrote the number $120,000 in my ledger. Then I underlined it 3 times. That evening, I drove to Attorney Cho's office. The snow was thick on Ogden Avenue, traffic crawling like the world was warning me to slow down. Inside, she'd already printed a motion, temporary restraining order, pre-filled with dates and exhibits. She flipped through the binder I'd built. Locksmith photos, contractor affidavit, bank logs, screenshots, and the doorbell cam still of Kyle's left knee bending on the porch. "You've done half my job for me," she said. "Then do the other half," I replied. "We'll file first thing tomorrow," she said. "Hearing date, December 26th. It'll stick like glue. Jean called while I was still in the office.
Caught her, he said.
Brianna met the contractor again, same guy, Frank, parking lot behind a paint supply store. She handed him an envelope. Cash? Looked like it. I got photos of the bills before he pocketed them, serials ending in 9803. Frank's willing to testify if it keeps him out of trouble. I thanked him, hung up, and sat in my car a long time before driving home. My headlights washed over the front door, new brass deadbolt gleaming under the porch light. The house looked peaceful, but I'd stopped trusting peace. Inside, I made a pot of coffee and sat at my kitchen table. My wife's old Christmas wreath still hung above the window, browning at the edges. I thought of her hands tying that ribbon last winter. She would have known exactly what to say. Don't let them touch the house. I whispered it aloud. I'm not leaving. At 8:37 p.m., Hannah called. Dad, you're scaring me. You haven't slept. I'll sleep when the locks mean something again, I said. I printed out the court form you sent. It looks solid. It'll look better once the judge signs it. Before hanging up, she said softly, Mom would have been proud of how you're handling this. Handling it? I said. No, I'm just collecting proof. The next morning, December 20th, the certified letters went out, one to Kyle and Brianna's apartment, another to their lawyer. Each envelope carried a stamped notice, cease and desist, unauthorized use of expired power of attorney. I watched the postal clerk weigh them and stamp the forms. It was the sound of accountability hitting paper. By nightfall, my phone pinged with one more message from Hannah, a screen capture from Brianna's Instagram story. The caption read, Big changes coming soon. Sometimes family doesn't understand progress, the image behind it. My front porch zoomed in through the same wreath she'd once admired. That was their mistake, ego. I sent the post to Jean and Cho. Cho replied, perfect. It shows intent. We'll add it as Exhibit F. That night, I lay in bed with the binder open beside me. I'd labeled every page. My wife's photo peeked through the clear cover like she was watching the audit unfold. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about respect, the kind you don't get by asking. Friday, December 19th, 1 week after the break-in. We had everything lined up. The affidavit, the motion, the paper trail. Kyle and Brianna thought they were the ones setting the stage. But they didn't realize I'd already booked the theater, sold the tickets, and written the ending. The hearing was set for December 26th. Christmas was coming, and this year, justice was going to be wrapped in court paper and cold truth. At 10:06 a.m. on December 23rd, my phone chimed with the sound I'd been waiting for, a fraud alert. The subject line read, Attempted draw on HELOC account. Under it, a single sentence, caller claimed to be authorized under power of attorney. I stared at the email until the letters swam. They'd finally done it. The bait was bitten. I called Mr. Delgado before finishing my coffee. He answered on the second ring. They tried to pull $120,000 this morning, he said, voice tight. Caller identified himself as Kyle Ellison. He said the original documents were signed and he'd bring the POA after Christmas. Did you record it? We did, bank policy. We've frozen the line and preserved the file. I exhaled slowly. Keep it locked, Mr. Delgado. You just saved my house. I forwarded the alert to Attorney Cho. 10 minutes later, she called back, crisp as winter glass. Beautiful timing, she said. That's attempted fraud in writing. We'll attach it as Exhibit G. Hearing stays on the 26th. Outside, snow fell sideways across the yard, dusting the mailbox like a witness under oath. At noon, a new message popped up on my phone, this one from Brianna. Tell your dad I'm sorry, but we had to move fast. The roof's a liability. I laughed aloud, the sound dry and mean. Liability. That $2,800 fake invoice had come full circle. I pulled it from the binder, flattened the wrinkles, and placed it beside my coffee. Evidence had never smelled so sweet. Jean called next. Followed Kyle this morning, he said. He met a notary at a strip mall office near Ogden and River Road. They talked about restamping paperwork, but it didn't happen. Can we prove that? Already on it. I've got the notary's card and a statement that no documents were signed. Just conversation. That's the twist, I said quietly. They tried to resurrect an expired POA, but it died again, on tape. By mid-afternoon, the pieces had clicked into perfect alignment. Attorney Cho sent me a draft of the courtroom binder, 32 pages, indexed and tabbed. Page 1, affidavit of entry. Page 6, expired POA with notary log. Page 21, bank call transcript. Page 27, Instagram screenshot, key emoji included. The cover sheet read simply, Ellison v. Ellison in re-fraudulent POA attempt. I spent Christmas Eve at Hannah's house. The tree lights glowed against the window, but my mind was still in the courthouse. I watched my grandchildren open presents, pretending not to think about depositions and exhibits. Hannah caught me drifting. You'll win, she said. Mom would call this the neat ending she always wanted. She liked neat endings, I admitted. But this one's going to be loud first. After dinner, I slipped into the guest room and checked my binder one last time. Each tab felt like armor. I tucked my wife's locket, her initials engraved on the back inside the front pocket. My heart settled a little. Christmas morning came quiet and colorless. I woke early, made coffee, and wrote in my ledger, Deck 25, fraud attempt confirmed. Hearing Deck 26, 10 a.m., bring every receipt. That afternoon, Jean dropped by with one final gift, a printed transcript of the bank call. I played it through my laptop speakers. Kyle's voice was calm, almost bored. Yes, this is Kyle Ellison. I'm acting under power of attorney for my father, Mark Ellison. We'd like to draw $120,000 before year end. Then Delgado's voice, Sir, I'll need to see that document. And Kyle, I'll bring it after the holiday. Click. It was the sound of my son betting on paperwork he didn't own. I turned off the computer and sat by the window. The neighborhood was asleep, roofs lined with frost. Somewhere across town, Kyle and Brianna were probably congratulating themselves. Believing the bank would clear their draw once offices reopened, they didn't know the judge's calendar was already cleared for me. At 7 a.m. the next morning, December 26th, I stood outside the courthouse in my best wool coat, binder tucked under my arm like a weapon made of truth. The air smelled of salt and diesel from snowplows. The courthouse doors swung open at 9 on the dot. Attorney Cho joined me at the steps. She smiled, calm as ever. You ready, Mr. Ellison? I nodded. I've been ready since the night someone used my key. We walked inside together. The bailiff held the door, and the echo of my footsteps sounded like a countdown. The stage was set. Tomorrow, the world would learn what happens when you try to steal a house from a man who keeps his receipts. The courtroom felt colder than the street outside. It was December 26th, 10:02 a.m., the day after Christmas. The courthouse was nearly empty, half the clerks still on holiday leave. But for me, this was Christmas morning all over again, only this time the gift came wrapped in subpoenas and affidavits. The clerk called the case Ellison versus Ellison. The words clanged like iron in my chest. I took a seat beside Attorney Cho at the petitioner's table, my binder upright in front of me, the locket tucked inside its pocket like a quiet witness. Across the aisle, Kyle and Brianna looked smaller than I remembered. Kyle had traded his easy grin for a jaw set too tight. Brianna wore a blazer, a little too white for winter, her fingers twitching around a phone she couldn't use here. Their lawyer, a polished man with a red tie, shuffled papers without looking at me. The bailiff announced, "All rise," and Judge Ramirez entered, a man who looked like he'd seen enough family feuds to fill a library. He nodded once and sat. "Let's make this quick," he said. "What are we here for?" Attorney Cho stood. "Your Honor, we're here for a temporary restraining order to prevent unauthorized financial activity using an expired power of attorney. The respondents attempted to access the petitioner's home equity line on December 23rd, claiming authority under an instrument that expired August 31st. Ramirez raised an eyebrow. "Expired?" "Yes, Your Honor, Exhibit B." She handed him the notarized copy, the expiration date clear as daylight. He scanned it, then looked up. "And who attempted the access?" "The petitioner's son, Kyle Ellison." Kyle's lawyer rose smoothly. "Your Honor, my client acted in good faith. He believed his father needed assistance managing his property and finances following a recent surgery. There was no criminal intent, only a misunderstanding within the family. Misunderstanding? I said, standing before Cho could stop me. Your Honor, I can show you exactly what kind of misunderstanding it was. Ramirez gestured. Go ahead, Mr. Ellison, briefly. I walked to the evidence table, opened my binder, and slid out the first page. This is my ledger, I said. It shows every payment, every bill, every receipt I've written since 1998. That house was paid off in 2004. There's no mortgage. The only thing left to manage was my peace of mind. Page by page, I laid them out. The contractor invoice dated December 10th, marked cash. The locksmith's photo of pick scratches on my old deadbolt. The screenshot of Brianna's Instagram post circling my street with a key emoji. The bank transcript from December 23rd, Kyle's voice confirming the attempted draw for $120,000. Cho followed behind me, stacking each document neatly on the judge's bench. All exhibits authenticated, Your Honor. Ramirez flipped through the pages, his frown deepening. Mr. Ellison, he said to Kyle, why were you in your father's house on December 14th? Kyle stammered. I was checking the roof. There was a leak. No, there wasn't, I said. I've lived there 30 years. The roof hasn't leaked since '09, and I fixed that myself. The only thing leaking that night was trust. Ramirez turned to Brianna. And you, Mrs. Ellison, why did your phone's location show your presence at the property the same evening? She blinked rapidly, glancing at her lawyer. We were just prepping it for appraisal. We wanted to help Dad see how much equity he had. Ramirez leaned forward. You were appraising property that isn't yours. The room went quiet. The heating vent clicked once. You could hear every page turn in the clerk's notebook. Attorney Cho stepped forward, voice calm. Your Honor, the petitioner's neighbor, Mrs. Patel, saw two individuals entering the property that night with a key. She later identified both respondents. We have her signed affidavit here, along with the doorbell footage, time-stamped 6:11 p.m. She played the short clip on her tablet, the grainy video of two hooded figures stepping confidently through my front door. Kyle dropped his gaze. Brianna whispered something I couldn't hear. Then Cho called Gene Doyle, my private investigator. Gene's boots echoed across the tile as he took the stand. I spoke with the contractor who issued that $2,800 invoice, he testified. He confirmed a woman fitting Mrs. Ellison's description hired him in cash, saying she was prepping the home for inspection. I also obtained photos of her handing him an envelope of bills, matching that payment. Cho asked, did the contractor believe he was working for the homeowner? Yes, ma'am. He thought the man was incapacitated. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Next came Mr. Delgado from the bank. He confirmed the December 23rd call, the attempted draw, and the freeze order that stopped it. When Cho asked how he verified the caller, Delgado said he identified himself as Kyle Ellison, son of the account holder, and cited a power of attorney. We later discovered it had expired. Finally, Cho presented the transcript of that very call. The judge read silently for a moment, then looked up at Kyle. Son, you have any explanation for this? Kyle's lawyer started to speak, but Ramirez held up a hand. Not you, him! Kyle's throat bobbed. I thought I was helping, he muttered. Dad doesn't. He doesn't keep up with things the way he used to. I stared at him. You mean I don't roll over for greed the way you do? Ramirez banged the gavel once. Enough. He turned to Brianna. And your listing post on social media? The one showing your father-in-law's porch with a key emoji. What was that? She forced a smile. It was aspirational content. For engagement. The judge's eyebrows lifted. Engagement, he repeated flatly. Noted. He set the binder down, clasped his hands, and spoke into the hush. Here's my ruling. The court grants the temporary restraining order effective immediately. Respondents are prohibited from accessing or encumbering the petitioner's property in any way. All accounts and documents remain under the petitioner's sole control. Any further action will result in referral for criminal fraud investigation. The gavel fell. The sound cracked through the room like thunder on glass. Across the aisle, Kyle's shoulders slumped. Brianna's jaw tightened. Their lawyer whispered something about appeals, but they weren't listening. I didn't look at them when I left the table. I looked at the judge and said, "Thank you, Your Honor." Outside, the hallway smelled of old wood and dust. I could finally breathe. Attorney Cho handed me the signed copy of the TRO, the ink still wet. "You did well," she said. "I didn't do it alone," I replied, sliding the document into my binder. Paperwork did. As we stepped into the winter light, snowflakes drifted like confetti over the courthouse steps. For the first time in weeks, I felt the cold without fear. Behind me, the doors closed with a sound I'll never forget, a lock clicking home. By Monday, December 29th, the phone calls had stopped, but not for me. Kyle and Brianna's lines went dark, their voicemail boxes full. My phone, on the other hand, wouldn't stop buzzing. The bank wanted follow-up statements, the investigator wanted to deliver affidavits, and the courthouse clerk emailed copies of the signed injunction like it was a Christmas card. The victory felt heavy, not sweet. I'd won, yes, but winning against your own blood isn't something you celebrate with champagne. You mark it quietly, with paperwork and a long walk through the cold. The first call came from Mr. Delgado. "Mr. Ellison, I wanted to let you know the HELOC drawer has been officially blocked. We've flagged your account and restricted access to your name only. The branch manager asked me to extend his personal apology for what you've been through. I appreciate it," I said. "You and your people saved me a roof. After I hung up, I sat at my kitchen table, the same table where my wife used to write Christmas cards, and started organizing receipts." Each line item in the binder now had meaning. $389 for the locksmith, $1,500 for Jean, $287 in filing fees, $9.85 postage for certified letters. I wrote them all under a new header, Justice Expenses. It looked neat, tidy, final, but justice wasn't the only thing settling. That afternoon, Jean called again. "Frank, the contractor, came by my office. He's scared. Says Brianna's stopped answering his calls. He wants to make his affidavit official under oath." "Good," I said. "Let's give him the protection of paper, too." By evening, I had Frank's signed statement notarized and faxed to Attorney Cho. It confirmed everything. Brianna paid in cash, directed the work, used my address, and claimed I was unavailable due to health. The next day, Hannah forwarded me screenshots from a family group chat I hadn't been part of in months. Brianna was spinning, calling it a misunderstanding, blaming clerical confusion. Kyle's messages came slower, angrier. "Dad's making this worse." I didn't reply. I didn't have to. Jean called again 2 days later. "You might want to sit down for this." Their landlord posted a 5-day notice on their door. Word is, they lost the deposit on a flip house. Someone pulled out when the bank flagged the fraud alert. I closed my eyes, not in joy, but in understanding. That's how greed works. It eats its own. Attorney Cho filed for the permanent injunction right after. She told me, "The court's moving fast. They want this finalized before year-end. We'll seek cost reimbursement and possibly a civil penalty for emotional distress." "Emotional distress," I repeated, chuckling. "Feels more like emotional bookkeeping." That night I sat by the living room window, ledger open, pen balanced in hand. Outside the snow was falling soft and slow. Inside the house was silent, no locks being tested, no shadows behind curtains, no ghosts of betrayal. Just me, my coffee, and the sound of a furnace that still worked because I'd kept the receipts. I wrote in my ledger, Deck 29. Fraud stopped. Bank secured. Court date pending. House still mine. At 8:42 p.m., my phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. "You'll regret making this public." No name, but I didn't need one. I took a screenshot, printed it, and slid it into the binder under a new tab. Threats, miscellaneous. I didn't reply. Silence is the last weapon left to honest men. When I went to bed, I felt something I hadn't felt since my wife passed. Peace. Not joy, not victory, just a kind of stillness that meant the storm had spent itself. The following morning, The bank emailed a confirmation, title flagged, do not proceed without owner in person. I smiled. I'd gotten my wish. My name was once again the only one tied to my home. Hearing for the permanent injunction was set for December 31st, the last day of the year, a fitting end to the story. I poured myself another cup of coffee, leaned back in my chair and whispered to the empty kitchen, this house doesn't just stand on bricks, it stands on proof. This time, the silence wasn't empty. It was earned. New Year's Eve morning broke sharp and silver over Naperville, the kind of cold that makes even sunlight feel like steel. I was up before dawn, ironing my one good shirt, the same one I'd worn to my wife's memorial. Funny thing, justice has its own dress code. When I walked into the courthouse at 9:45 a.m., I wasn't nervous anymore. I'd already done the math, tallied every betrayal, and filed every emotion into neat rows of proof. All that was left was the verdict. Judge Ramirez took the bench right on time. His robe looked heavier than it had last week, like he'd carried too many family feuds through the holidays. He glanced over the docket and said, let's close out this year with something clean. Attorney Cho rose beside me, composed as ever. Across the aisle, Kyle and Brianna sat smaller than before. No smiles, no phones, no confidence. The red-tie lawyer had been replaced by someone younger, hungrier, and visibly unsure. Your Honor, Cho began, we're here on our motion for a permanent injunction and reimbursement of costs associated with an attempted fraudulent use of an expired power of attorney. Ramirez nodded, flipping to the bank transcript. I remember. December 23rd. Attempted draw, $120,000. He looked straight at Kyle. Mr. Ellison, did you, or did you not, attempt to initiate that draw? Kyle's voice barely reached the bench. I made an inquiry. An inquiry? The judge said. Your own voice on the transcript says draw. Brianna reached for Kyle's arm, whispering something too low to hear. The judge cut her off with a glance. Mrs. Ellison, you're named as a co-respondent. Anything you'd like to add? She straightened her blazer, chin trembling. We just wanted to secure the property. Dad wasn't managing things well. Ramirez raised an eyebrow. You mean the father who filed every tax return on time and who itemized his attorney's fees to the cent? He tapped my binder. This man could teach the county clerk about record-keeping. A few people in the back chuckled. The judge shuffled the papers again, then spoke slowly. Clearly, this court finds that the respondents knowingly attempted to use an expired power of attorney to encumber the petitioner's property. The motion for permanent injunction is hereby granted. Respondents are barred from any financial dealings related to the property at 1048 Maple Grove Lane. Costs and fees in the amount of $2,185 are awarded to the petitioner. He looked up again. And one more thing. This matter will be referred to the state's attorney for review of potential elder financial abuse. Brianna gasped. Kyle's face drained white. The new lawyer started to object, but the judge waved him off. Sit down, counselor. You can appeal in another year. This family needs distance, not dialogue. The gavel came down once hard. The echo filled the courtroom like thunder trapped in a bottle. When it was over, I gathered my papers quietly. Joe whispered, Congratulations, Mr. Ellison. I shook my head. It's not a win. It's a correction. Outside, frost glittered on the courthouse steps. Hannah was waiting, bundled in her coat. She hugged me tight. It's over, she said. Almost, I replied. There's one more thing to fix. We met Gene at a diner nearby. He slid me a manila envelope. Photos, printouts, timelines. I didn't need them anymore, but I took them. They were proof of something bigger than money. That detail can still beat deception. When I got home that afternoon, the house greeted me like an old friend. I replaced the interior lock, one last measure of closure. The brass turned smooth beneath my fingers, and I felt something settle deep in my chest. Later, Delgado called from the bank to confirm the case file was closed, and my name was sole owner on record again. We'll flag it for internal training, he said. You probably saved a few more people today. I thanked him, hung up, and opened my ledger one last time for the year. Under December 31, I wrote Judgment entered. Title secured. Balance, peace. At midnight, fireworks cracked faintly somewhere over the river. I sat in my recliner, the house quiet, the locket warm in my palm. You didn't lose me, Kyle. You pawned me and got caught. Justice isn't about revenge. It's about closure that clicks like a lock finally turning home. January settled over Naperville like dust after a demolition. Quiet, harmless looking, but heavy if you breathed too deeply. The holidays were over. The court was closed for recess, and for the first time in months, I didn't wake up to a to-do list about locks, lawyers, or ledgers. The house was mine again. Not just on paper, mine in the way silence can be ownership. On the 3rd of January, I heard a knock on the door. I opened it to find Mrs. Patel standing there, cheeks pink from the cold, holding a plate of samosas wrapped in foil. "I saw the lights on," she said. "Thought I'd check on my favorite neighbor." I smiled. "You're looking at a man who just survived his own family," she tisked softly, shaking her head. "Some people forget blood doesn't mean belonging." I invited her in for tea. She sat across from me at the kitchen table, eyeing the binder on the counter. "You keep everything so neat," she said. "It's the only way I sleep," I told her, half joking. Before she left, she pressed a spare key into my palm. "If you ever need help, I'm right across the street." I hesitated, then logged the key into my ledger before pocketing it. "You're the only person I trust with one." That night, I stood by the front window, watching her cross the street under the yellow porch lights. The quiet outside was no longer a threat. It was proof that no one was coming back. Over the next week, life began returning to ordinary. Jean sent one last envelope of photos, morning shots of my house from across the road, time-stamped but uneventful. His note was simple. All clear. Attorney Cho emailed a follow-up checklist titled Homeowner Safeguards for Seniors. It included things like add expiration clauses to POAs, keep all keys documented, and store important documents in 2 locations. I printed 2 copies, one for my records, one for Hannah's fridge. A few days later, I met Mr. Delgado for coffee at the bank cafe. He was friendlier without the desk between us. "You know," he said, stirring his cup, "what you did, it's going to help us spot a lot of future scams. People don't realize how easy it is for family to turn financial. Family's just another variable in an equation," I said. "But numbers don't lie," he chuckled. "Still keeping your ledger?" "Every day." "Good. Paper remembers what people forget." Back home, I found a message waiting on my phone. It was from Kyle, 2 words, "Can we talk?" I stared at it for a long time. Once upon a time, that question would have broken me. Now it just felt like noise. I deleted it without replying. Hannah called later that evening. "Did he reach out?" "He did." "And?" "I let silence do the talking," she exhaled. "That's probably best." The following Sunday, I went through every file one last time. Court orders, affidavits, receipts, all in order. At the end of the binder, I inserted one last page, a single line written in blue ink, "Kept the house." I set the binder on the bookshelf beside my wife's old cookbooks. She used to say, "Everything worth keeping should be where you can find it." Now it was. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the front windows, landing across the clean kitchen counter. The air smelled faintly of cardamom from Mrs. Patel's tea. I walked through each room, bedroom, office, living room, touching the walls lightly, like a man reacquainting himself with something sacred. Peace doesn't announce itself. It just shows up one day, sits down in the chair across from you and says, "You can rest now." I closed the last ledger of the year and whispered, "The house is mine." No sirens, no signatures, no noise. Just quiet ownership earned the hard way. For the first time since that night in December, I turned off the porch light before bed. February came early that year, all grey mornings and restless wind. I was making coffee one quiet Tuesday when something soft slid through the mail slot and landed on the floor. A glossy real estate flyer. I bent to pick it up and froze. Across the front, in bright gold letters, it read, "Coming soon, your dream home awaits." And right there, center frame, was my porch. My bricks, my door, my light. The listing photo was old, probably one Brianna had taken last fall, before she'd tried to sell me out of my own address. She'd recycled it for marketing, a desperate echo of a plan that had already burned. Beneath the picture, charming Naperville, Cape Cod. I laughed. Not the bitter laugh I'd grown used to, but the kind that comes when life hands you proof it has a sense of humor. I slipped the flyer into a page protector and filed it under a new binder tab, Ironies. Later that afternoon, Attorney Cho called. The state's attorney decided not to pursue criminal charges, she said. Given the injunction and restitution, they feel the civil penalties are enough. That's fine, I said. The paper already did what handcuffs couldn't. They did issue a note, though. Brianna's real estate license has been formally reprimanded. It's public record now. Good, I said. Maybe the next family she lists won't lose their home in the process. After we hung up, I made tea and sat by the window, the same window I'd once watched strangers walk past in the night. Outside, the snow had melted into small rivers that caught the late sunlight like glass. On the counter sat the binder, 3 inches thick, every page proof that I'd survived my own blood. The brass lock on the door gleamed faintly in the reflection, the same way it had after the courtroom. I walked over, tested it once, and listened to the click. Still solid. I took my wife's locket from its hook by the door and opened it. Her smile stared back from the tiny oval frame. I whispered, "We kept it, love. Every inch of it." The house smelled faintly of sawdust and tea, old wood and victory. Not a big victory, just the quiet kind that makes the world right again. That evening I called Hannah. "How's the house feel now, Dad?" she asked. "Like it finally exhaled," I said. She laughed softly. "Mom would have liked that. She always liked a clean ending." After we hung up, I opened my ledger one last time. Under February 5th, I wrote, "Flyer arrived. Porch photo reused." Justice completed. Life resumed. I paused, then added a final line in the margin. "You didn't lose me. You pawned me and got caught." When I closed the book, the sound was soft, like a door shutting gently after a long storm. I looked around the living room. The walls were still the color she'd chosen years ago, that stubborn off-white that never matched anything but somehow matched us. The clock ticked steady. The refrigerator hummed. Everything ordinary felt precious. Before turning in, I stepped out onto the porch. The air was cold, clean. Across the street, Mrs. Patel waved from her doorway, mug in hand. I waved back, smiling. The night was perfectly still. No trespassers, no ghosts. Just the sound of my own keys in my pocket and the comfort of knowing every lock answered to me alone. If you're listening from your own kitchen table tonight, counting your own receipts, remember this: revenge doesn't have to roar. Sometimes it's just a binder of proof, a brass lock that clicks, and a man who learns that peace is quieter than anger. That's how I got my house back, and myself with it.